December 19, 1944. Eastern France. Winter has locked the ground hard. Roads are narrow. Fuel is limited. At a forward headquarters near Verdun, General George S. Patton studies a map laid flat across a table. The German Ardennes offensive has broken through Allied lines. Bastogne is surrounded. Weather has grounded aircraft. Infantry units are cut off. Most Allied commanders expect days, possibly weeks, before any large formation can respond. Patton does not. He calculates distances, road capacity, fuel consumption, time. Then he commits the Third Army to a 90-degree turn, redirecting 3 corps north through snow and congestion toward Bastogne. It is not an emotional decision. It is a logistical one. German intelligence believes such a maneuver cannot happen so quickly. Allied staff officers quietly doubt it can be done at all. This moment does not stand alone. It is the result of a pattern. 5 decisions made over 2 years that defined how Patton fought, moved, and imposed pressure on his enemy. Those decisions began long before the snow fell. By the time the United States entered the war in December 1941, George S. Patton was not an unknown figure inside the U.S. Army. He had spent more than 2 decades preparing for a kind of war most American officers still considered theoretical: mechanized warfare, speed, deep penetration, command from the front. Patton's professional identity was shaped after the First World War, where he observed that modern firepower punished hesitation more than aggression. During the interwar years, he studied European doctrine closely, particularly German armored theory, while pushing for American tank forces that could move independently rather than support infantry at walking pace. This placed him at odds with more conservative senior officers, but it also made him useful when the war demanded rapid adaptation. By 1942, the U.S. Army was large but inexperienced. Its soldiers were trained, equipped, and motivated, yet untested against a veteran enemy. American units entering North Africa faced German formations that had already fought across Poland, France, the Balkans, and deep into the Soviet Union. The imbalance was not just tactical, it was psychological. Patton's reputation reflected this tension. To superiors like Eisenhower and Marshall, he was aggressive, disciplined, and operationally sharp. To many subordinates, he was demanding and inflexible. To peers, he was unpredictable, but no one doubted that he understood movement, pressure, and command presence. When American forces first clashed seriously with German armor in early 1943, those weaknesses became visible: poor coordination, slow reactions, inconsistent leadership. The result was a shock that forced Allied command to confront the reality of modern war. It was in this environment, where confidence was fragile and time was limited, that Patton's approach stopped being theoretical. Decisions that once seemed excessive or abrasive became functional. Discipline, speed, and relentless forward motion were no longer personality traits. They were tools. The first test would come not in Europe, but in the deserts of North Africa, where American forces faced a decisive moment they were not prepared for. In February 1943, American forces in Tunisia faced their first large-scale engagement against German troops. At Kasserine Pass, elements of the U.S. II Corps were outmaneuvered by experienced German formations under Field Marshal Erwin Rommel. The defeat exposed weaknesses that training exercises had not revealed: fragmented command, poor use of terrain, and a lack of operational urgency. The loss was not catastrophic in numbers, but it was damaging in effect. Units withdrew in disorder. Equipment was abandoned. Confidence eroded quickly. German commanders concluded that American troops lacked cohesion and would not withstand sustained pressure. Allied command responded by removing Major General Lloyd Fredendall and appointing Patton to take over II Corps on March 6, 1943. Patton did not arrive with new weapons or reinforcements. He arrived with order. He enforced standards immediately. Uniform regulations were applied. Command posts were moved forward. Officers were held accountable for unit readiness. Movements were timed and controlled. These measures were not symbolic. They were designed to reassert authority in a force that had momentarily lost it. Within weeks, II Corps faced German units again. This time, American formations held ground, coordinated artillery effectively, and responded faster to changing conditions. At battles such as El Getter, the Germans encountered a force that absorbed pressure rather than collapsing under it. For Patton, this period marked the first clear application of a principle he would repeat throughout the war. Control creates speed, and speed creates advantage. Discipline was not an end in itself. It was the foundation for movement. German reports following the Tunisia fighting noted increased resistance and improved coordination among American units. The psychological balance began to shift. This change did not occur because of a single engagement. It came from decisions made before contact, how units were organized, how orders were enforced, and how rapidly Patton expected results. Those choices would soon follow him beyond North Africa, into operations where speed mattered even more than recovery. By late summer 1944, Patton's Third Army was operating across France at a pace that exceeded Allied planning assumptions. Following the breakout from Normandy in August, his forces advanced hundreds of kilometers in weeks, often outrunning supply lines. Fuel shortages, not German resistance, became the primary constraint. Allied command repeatedly urged caution. The broader strategy required balance, supporting Montgomery in the north while maintaining pressure across the front. Patton acknowledged these constraints but continued to prioritize momentum. He believed pauses favored the defender and allowed German units time to reform. This approach culminated in the autumn fighting in Lorraine. German resistance stiffened along prepared positions near Metz. Progress slowed. Casualties increased. Critics within Allied headquarters argued that Patton's emphasis on speed had reached its limit against fortified defenses. Then, in December 1944, the situation changed abruptly. On December 16, German forces launched a large-scale offensive through the Ardennes. Allied lines were penetrated. Bastogne, a key road junction, was encircled. Weather conditions grounded air support and restricted reconnaissance. Initial estimates suggested relief would require time and regrouping. Patton had anticipated the possibility of a German counteroffensive. His staff had prepared contingency plans weeks earlier, including the option of reorienting the Third Army north. This preparation reduced decision time when the crisis emerged. On December 19, Patton ordered a 90-degree pivot of his forces. 3 corps were redirected toward Bastogne. The maneuver required precise coordination, rerouting columns, reallocating fuel, and maintaining traffic flow on limited winter roads. The decision carried risk. Units would move with minimal reserves. Supply margins were thin. Failure would expose flanks and disrupt broader Allied operations. Yet the order was executed without delay. German commanders monitoring Allied movements initially discounted the speed of the response. Their calculations underestimated both Patton's preparation and his tolerance for logistical strain. Within days, Third Army units were moving north through snow and congestion, closing the distance to Bastogne faster than German planners had expected. The outcome of this maneuver would define Patton's wartime reputation more than any previous advance. The Third Army began its northward movement on December 20, 1944. Columns advanced in winter conditions that limited visibility and slowed traffic. Roads were narrow, often frozen, and crowded with retreating units, refugees, and supply vehicles. Despite this, movement schedules were maintained with few deviations. On December 26, elements of the 4th Armored Division reached the outskirts of Bastogne. At approximately 16:50 hours, lead units broke through German lines near Ardennes, opening a narrow corridor to the encircled garrison. The siege was not immediately lifted, but the encirclement was broken. The speed of the relief altered the operational picture. German units committed to holding Bastogne were forced onto the defensive sooner than planned. Resources intended for continued advance were redirected to containment. Momentum shifted. Patton's decision did not rely on improvisation alone. Fuel allocations had been prepositioned. Road priorities were enforced. Corps commanders were given clear, limited objectives. These measures reduced friction during execution. Casualties were significant on both sides. Progress was uneven. Weather continued to complicate coordination. But the central fact remained. A large mechanized force had reoriented and advanced under winter conditions in a time frame German command considered unlikely. Post-action German assessments noted surprise at the speed of the response. Allied command acknowledged that the maneuver reduced the depth and duration of the German offensive. Bastogne remained contested, but the initiative had shifted. For Patton, this was not an isolated success. It reinforced his core belief that decisions made before contact, planning, preparation, and willingness to accept risk determined outcomes more reliably than reactions made under fire. The consequences of this decision extended beyond Bastogne. They influenced how Allied command evaluated mobility, command flexibility, and operational tempo for the remainder of the campaign. Those consequences became clearer in the weeks and months that followed. The relief of Bastogne did not end the fighting in the Ardennes, but it altered the structure of the campaign. German forces, already constrained by fuel shortages and deteriorating weather, were now required to defend ground rather than exploit momentum. Units committed to maintaining the encirclement were forced into costly engagements against advancing Allied formations. For the German High Command, the rapid appearance of Patton's Third Army on the southern flank disrupted operational planning. Intelligence estimates prior to the offensive assumed Allied forces would need extended time to reorient major formations. That assumption proved incorrect. The resulting compression of the German timetable reduced the feasibility of reaching the Meuse River, one of the offensive's primary objectives. Allied command assessments following the Ardennes campaign acknowledged the significance of the maneuver. While the German offensive ultimately failed due to multiple factors, including logistics, air superiority, and resistance along the northern shoulder, the speed of Third Army's response shortened the duration of the crisis. It also limited the freedom of action available to German armored units during the critical early phase. Patton's reputation within Allied leadership evolved as a result. Previously viewed as an aggressive commander best suited for pursuit operations, he was now recognized as capable of executing complex operational shifts under pressure. This recognition did not eliminate controversy. His methods remained demanding, and his tolerance for risk continued to attract scrutiny, but the results were difficult to dismiss. German post-war analyses and memoirs frequently reference the difficulty of predicting American operational behavior during late 1944. While Patton was not always named explicitly, the characteristics attributed to U.S. movements, speed, persistence, and early commitment, reflected his influence on Third Army operations. These traits complicated German defensive planning throughout the final months of the war. Beyond reputation, the implications were doctrinal. Allied planners increasingly emphasized flexibility at the operational level. The ability to reassign large formations rapidly, even at logistical cost, became a recognized advantage rather than a liability. Patton's approach demonstrated that calculated strain on supply systems could be acceptable if it produced decisive positional gains. The broader campaign into Germany in early 1945 reflected this shift. Allied forces moved with fewer pauses, maintaining pressure even when resistance increased. The expectation that German forces would be granted time to reorganize diminished. Speed became not just a tactical preference, but a strategic principle. Patton's role in this transformation was not singular, but it was illustrative. His decisions highlighted the relationship between preparation and execution. Contingency planning, command clarity, and acceptance of operational risk combined to produce outcomes that exceeded conventional expectations. As the war in Europe entered its final phase, Patton continued to operate within the same framework, emphasizing forward movement, early commitment, and decisive action. The Ardennes decision did not mark a departure from his methods. It confirmed them. The long-term significance of these choices would not be measured solely in territory gained or enemy losses inflicted, but in how future commanders understood the balance between caution and momentum. That balance, tested repeatedly during the war, remains central to understanding Patton's place in military history. George S. Patton's career during World War II illustrates a principle that extends beyond any single battle. Decisions made before contact often determine the outcome more than reactions made under fire. Discipline, preparation, and clarity of command were the foundations of his effectiveness. Speed, when applied with foresight, became a force multiplier, enabling operations that would have appeared impossible to both allies and enemies. Patton's approach also demonstrates the interplay between human and mechanical factors in modern warfare. Tanks, trucks, and artillery were not effective simply because they existed. Their value was realized through coordinated movement and decisive leadership. Commanders who underestimated the importance of operational tempo, or who assumed that caution alone ensured safety, found themselves reacting rather than shaping events. The psychological dimension of Patton's decisions cannot be ignored. German assessments repeatedly noted the difficulty of predicting American movements, a perception reinforced by speed and audacity. By maintaining relentless pressure, Patton imposed constraints on the enemy's planning cycle, forcing defensive responses rather than offensive opportunities. Fear, while not a weapon in the conventional sense, became a strategic factor embedded in operational rhythm. Yet Patton's methods carried costs. Logistical strain, elevated casualties, and friction within command structures were constant challenges. His willingness to accept risk underscores a broader lesson. Leadership involves balancing the potential for gain against the probability of loss. History remembers the results, but the choices that produce them require precise judgment and calculated audacity. In the final analysis, the 5 decisions that defined Patton's wartime effectiveness: restoring discipline in crisis, prioritizing speed over caution, enforcing operational clarity, leveraging logistics proactively, and pivoting decisively under pressure, offer enduring insight into the nature of command. They exemplify how preparation, foresight, and decisive action intersect to shape outcomes in complex, dynamic environments. Patton's legacy is not myth, nor is it legend. It is the practical application of principles that allowed one commander to consistently generate results that exceeded expectation. His career reminds us that in war, as in leadership broadly, the capacity to act decisively, grounded in knowledge, discipline, and calculated risk, remains among the most potent tools available. The Ardennes maneuver, the relief of Bastogne, and the operational tempo he maintained were not isolated incidents. They were the culmination of repeated decisions that together made George S. Patton one of the most dangerous and effective generals of World War II.